I'm just kidding. I haven't seen you all day, man. Welcome to the conference. This is ng-conf.
Ask him what he was doing.
Igor, what have you been doing?
Having a bath.
He said he's having a bath.
All right. Well, that's good to know. All right, so here we go. We're just going to start from the top. This is Google Moderator, so the questions that got the most votes got floated to the top. And we'll just let you guys decide.
Do we let the audience ask questions?
They kind of did through this.
All right, okay.
We can interject some of those too.
All right. If we don't like the ones up here, I'll ask the audience for a question.
Yeah, whoever asks the quietest question. We'll go with that. You guys are really good at that. So, okay, start it off. This is by Merrick. He says, what kind of performance optimizations should be leveraged in Angular?
I might pass the mic to James. James, you want to take this?
I can take it. So if you're talking about performance optimizations in your app, maybe the best advice is keep your DOM small. That there's really no point in rendering off-screen elements, and so if you have long lists, use infinite scrolling, and just keep everything very small and clean, because it will make Angular fast, but it makes all of your DOM operations fast.
Anyone else have anything to add?
Just like in the double-click presentation, if you're using ng-show, ng-hide, and that's hiding a div element that has a lot of other directives inside, then consider changing that to an ng-if so that the inner stuff won't compile.
Okay, cool. So next question.
All right. So this next one that got upvoted is by Gedsky. I've heard great things about that guy. So that's me. What do you think of the virtual DOM in React.js? That's Facebook's framework. Would something like this be possible with Angular to reduce the frequency of DOM manipulation?
Well, I made Mishko go read about this beforehand, so I'll make him answer the question.
So I didn't know nothing about React until earlier today. I did some reading, so I'm kind of new to it. The idea of a virtual DOM, I like it a lot. It's an interesting idea. It's worth exploring further. How exactly would fit to Angular? That's a good question. I'm not exactly sure, but it's worth exploring. So if any of you guys are interested in looking into it and comparing the performance implications of it, that would be something that we would be supporting.
Well, I think also if we make the directives more declarative, as you kind of went that way in Angular Dart, it's like more optimizations like that will be possible. But I wanted to say about this that I actually think that it's great, the idea is great, but I think at least in theory, I mean, in the future, this is something that should be done in the browser, like in the DOM, you know? Like, I don't see why you should need the library to do this kind of optimizations. Like, I think the DOM should do it by default.
Cool.
Awesome. All right, this next one. What are the main pain points you've seen developers experience with Angular, and what are your plans to address them? We just saw a bunch from Voida. What else do you guys have in mind?
We talked a little bit about this at the keynote at the beginning, about how we're going to simplify a bunch of the user interfaces. Documentation was one of the early things. Anybody run into documentation problems?
You know this about documentations, right? There's two kinds of documentations: the ones that people complain about, and the ones people don't read.
All right.
If anyone has specifics, we're happy to answer.
Do you want to field any from the audience? Or?
Yeah, anyone has a specific question? Some pain point you had and you'd like us to help out? Are we going to bring back Discuss or something like it?
No.
Brian removed that.
I was the one that killed it.
It was Brian.
Yeah, you guys we can talk later. Yeah? Okay, let's do an audience vote. Who says they don't like they're glad Discuss is gone? Yeah? All right, okay. This is the scary part.
All right,
okay.
next question.
Hold on. Let me sum this
question.
up. We have a lot of communication channels, and we were trying to limit the number of ones that we actually look at. And that's one.
Brad, accept my pull request, please.
Indeed. So best way to get a hold of us is through GitHub, Twitter, and Google+. And I think we're going to try and limit communication to those channels. Because those ones we can actually process. We just can't look at a million lists at once. And so getting rid of one of them was our way to make our lives a little more sane.
Right. This Google Plus you speak of.
Right.
So let me repeat that. So this man here said that we had shut down Discuss. We knew there were problems with the documentation, but we didn't have a way for people to give feedback on what the problems with the documentation were. So on GitHub, there's this ability to submit issues, and we would rather you submit issues against the documentation, or even better, there's this really great button at the top that says improve this doc. And so you can please, even if you get it wrong, this is a great way for you to interact with our team and learn about how things work. So we would love for more people, even if you're like, I think it should be this, but I'm not sure, we're happy to receive pull requests like that.
Right, and so what we wanted to do is encourage people to be channeling their efforts into improving the docs, so that way we have kind of a single source of truth instead of just a bunch of these different channels.
And by the way, this was after we had spent about 5 weeks actually improving the docs. So yes. You may have a stale memory about how the docs used to be. Please go read them again. We've fixed a bunch of things, but we would like to know about other things that need fixing.
Right, sure, and we're definitely open to any sort of suggestions to improve the docs. That's absolutely we're not trying to say we don't care about what people have to say, but we're trying to really pull everyone together and make it so that way we have this really nice unified docs where all of the good effort goes towards that.
All right.
The ng-conf interface requires you to be extremely verbose. To compare it with Java doc, you just throw comments in, parameters. Is that something that you guys plan on improving in the future, so documentation doesn't take up quite so much space in your code?
So the question is, could we improve ng-doc to make it less verbose? Who wants to answer this?
Yeah, there are efforts to redo. There's a lot of problems with ng-doc, and there's a lot of, I think, lessons that can be learned from things like JS-doc and Java-doc. I don't think that having a lot of your code be documentation is a bad thing in general. I'm sorry. So I think that documentation in code is stuff that gets updated the fastest. So we're working on it, but lots of docs, not bad.
Cool. All right, let's move on to the next one.
Let's put the mic closer to your mouth. This mic is, they need to...
Yeah, go ahead and point the mic straight out. Thanks, guys. Okay, so this one, this is by Mark Walsh in Liverpool. It says, when are you planning to full integrate the UI router into Angular? I like that it assumes that that's happening. Is that happening? And when?
Brian, you want to talk about what you're going to do?
No, I actually have been talking with 2 of the guys working on UI router. They're somewhere in the audience here if you guys want to raise your hands. But yeah, talk to these guys. I've been talking with them. Really, it's a matter of kind of taking all of the lessons that we've learned, both from Angular's router and from UI router, and then figuring out what the kind of next steps are. So I have a design doc that I've been working on for a while, but I wanted to talk in person with these guys because I think that they know a lot about routing from working on UI router. So I don't think the plan will be to just kind of take the UI router repo and put it into the Angular organization. I think we'll probably try and do a fresh rewrite that's totally different from the current Angular router and the current UI router, but we'll take all of the learnings from both as well. And I invite anyone interested in routing to come talk to me and also talk to these UI router guys because they're very smart.
Awesome. AMD support, when is that landing?
Wojta, you talked about this a little bit, and we don't predict when, by the way.
What, AMD support, well, I hope I show that with the DI that basically the integration with modules is kind of native or like first-class citizen. And so that means with Angular 2.0, that's going to be soon.
I just want to make it clear that when you use Tracer, you can the outputted code that's compiled into ECMAScript 5 could be either in CommonJS or in require.js.
Yes. Yes.
So in 1.3, we're planning many improvements to the injector. And one of the things that I'm thinking about is that if we find volunteers from the community, we could take the learnings from the DI.js that Vojta's working on now and backport it back into Angular 1x so that we have the benefits of this new DI system faster. But we definitely need help with this. So if this is something that you guys are interested in and you have time to help with this, please reach out to us and we can talk about it more.
All right. What are some best practices for authentication in a single-page app with Angular? Okay, next question.
It's like, how do you build Angular app?
So here's the thing. We will probably need to defer to people who actually build real apps with Angular. I think we've heard a couple good talks on it today, and we can probably hook you up with those people. I'd say we don't have those things. This would be a good thing that we should have a consensus around. Yeah. We don't have it today. Igor, do you want to add something?
Well, we don't have a generic solution because there are so many different authentication schemes, and it's not easy to come up with one solution that just fits all the scenarios. Like the authentication system that we have at Google is very different from the ones you guys use. And maybe, depending on which company you work, you have your proprietary authentication system. So just having one that just works for everybody is hard. There are patterns that apply to most of the scenarios, and there are many blog posts about this. Like just recently I saw a blog post about cookies versus tokens and how you can use them for authentication. So there are many resources if you just search for them. And in general, like looking for patterns is more useful than for one code, just it works in all scenarios.
All right, let's talk Angular 2.
What's your favorite pattern now?
Paisley.
So honestly, I don't have a pattern because usually on most of the apps that I work with, the authentication is already solved the problem. So I don't. This is an area that I don't get to deal with very often. So I don't have an answer to that.
One common thing I've seen in a lot of apps is people will use the interceptors. So if you get like a 500 error from the server, the interceptor will handle that a certain way. If your session is expired, the interceptor will take you to the login page. So there's some common things you can do with interceptors. Yeah,
this is why we actually added interceptors into HTTP to enable this scenario. But there are other patterns like just using cookies, for example, and just checking cookies and based on that determining if the user's logged in, and there are others. Yeah.
Another option is to make your own service and just use that for all your AJAX requests, and then do your authentication in there.
All right, next question. Let's talk Angular 2. What's next for Angular JS?
Now, I know this question was put in here before we did our keynote. Does anyone have more specific questions, things we haven't covered already about Angular 2?
PhoneCat.
PhoneCat.
For Angular 2.
Will there be a PhoneCat for Angular 2? Or just throw it away? That's a good question. Do we still have PhoneCat? I think we do still have PhoneCat.
Well, we're going to build the reference app, right? So we are building an app that the team will use on a daily basis, and we're going to use this app as a documentation and as a reference of patterns and best practices. So this is going to be the next version of PhoneCat, but it's going to be a real app and much bigger than what PhoneCat is today.
I also think that, working on Angular 2.0 doesn't mean that we're going to remove Angular 1.3 from GitHub tomorrow, Like, we plan to get more community involvement, I think, for like maintaining it, but I think it will stay around.
For that matter, can I just suggest that there's a lot of like deprecated bad practices that are still floating around on GitHub that still claim to be authoritative, like Angular C, for example. So I just, if you have any control over that, I would suggest that you just put something on the README in big bold letters that says this is old.
That sounds awesome. Do you want to send us a pull request? Sure. All right.
So the question was, could we mark some deprecated things that are on the site? And yes, we would love help with any of that.
Yes, we will do anything to improve Angular, and it's doubly easy if you communicate it in like pull request form, because then it's like, yes, I want this, and we don't actually push the big green button. We do some Git stuff, but you know, in spirit, we push that big green button. All right, so no, that's awesome. That's an excellent suggestion. Thank you.
Go ahead.
So there's not going to be support for IE8 in 2.0, is that correct? And so is there any thoughts or discussions around potential backport options or ways that...
So the question is, hey, or the statement was, there's not going to be support for IE8 in Angular 2.0. That is true. And the question was there potential for backport options? Yes. Igor, do you want to talk about that at all?
Backport of what?
Of Angular 2.0 so it can actually be used.
Probably not Angular 2.0.
No. So Angular, I don't know if this was, I think this was mentioned already in Keynote, that we decided that Angular 2.0 is going to be only for the evergreen browsers, only for future, or for the browsers of the future. And this is very important because if we don't do this, then we're going to have this baggage that will carry on for even much longer than what we have to. Like, IE8 is going away. Like, people don't want to believe it, and I know that it's hard. I know it's hard. I understand. But it's going to go away. And if we add support for IE8 to like Angular 2.0, then Angular 2.0 will have to support IE8 for what, another 3-4 years? You know, that's not a good decision for Angular. So for this reason, Angular 2.0 is just going to be evergreen browsers. For IE8, yes, we announced that we're going to deprecate IE8 support. And this is primarily because Google just doesn't need it. And nobody else working on the core needs it. So it doesn't make sense for us to be spending a whole lot of time on IE8. But we understand that people in the community want IE8. And we have a plan of making it possible for you to have IE8 support. And I'm going to talk about it tomorrow.
Is 2.0 going to be all or nothing, or will it be able to work with 1.2 as well? Because you can imagine large apps like the DoubleClick team, they can't just upgrade to 2.0 right away with such a large application code base.
So the question was, will 2.0 be an all or nothing proposition, or can I use little bits at a time?
I think it's too early to tell, but from what, like the plans we have, the difference is going to be so big that it's not something we are primarily concerned right now. We really want to have the green field and just take the advantages of this new web platform that is coming and do the best thing possible with this new platform. And then we'll see what makes sense and backport or make compatible with the existing stuff.
Great. Okay, let's move to the next question. How do you avoid memory leaks in a single-page app with Angular?
Don't leak memory.
Perfect. Thanks, Igor. Check. I knew it was something like that.
You know, Igor, I'm a little puzzled by this question because we spend so much time making sure that we don't leak memory. Do you have some concrete examples where you do leak memory?
I do. Call the done function in your JavaScript animations.
Okay, if you don't call the done function, okay.
Hold on, I'm pretty sure Mishko just asked this web page a question, and it's not responding with any concrete examples, so bad question.
So there are a few patterns that if you break, you might run into memory leak issues. It's not very common though, and one of the things you can do to leak memory in an Angular application is to compile a chunk of DOM and not attach it to the document. If a chunk of DOM is not attached to the document, it's just sitting around, then that memory will be retained for a very long time or for the whole lifetime of the application. But in general, we took really good care of addressing the main patterns and the way people use the Angular framework, and made sure that these common usages don't result in memory leaks. One thing that we have ever seen was that the browsers are not perfect, and often when we get a bug report that Angular is leaking memory, it turns out that it's not Angular, but it's the browser. Like we have several cases when V8 was leaking memory, and it's really frustrating to look for these memory leaks because like you see them, like you know that this is leaking memory, and you're like hunting for it, and you're like questioning yourself, like how can this be? And after like days or weeks of research, you realize it's not me, it's the browser. And this actually happened to us, and we went to the V8 team, and they confirmed. And they've been working on several fixes to fix the situation. It's pretty complicated because V8 is not it's not a simple code base. It's a complex machinery. And the good news is that they fixed many of the issues that most commonly resulted in memory leaks from V8. There are few left. We just uncovered one just recently, and they're working on a fix for that one. So when you see a memory leak, if you can't confirm it, and if you like have no idea where it's coming from, it can be the browser. And then it's best to talk to the browser vendor and report the issue because they can fix that.
When you find those, do you send Microsoft a pull request?
So the question was, do we send Microsoft a pull request? I don't remember the browsers being open source, but I could be wrong.
No. So unfortunately, with IE, it's really hard to debug memory leaks there. I think it improved in IE 11. I know that they did a lot of work on the web developer tools, but before then, like the only way to notice that the memory was leaking was like using the activity monitor or whatever is the equivalent on Windows, and just watching how much memory the process of the browser was occupying. And if that went up, then yeah, the application or something somewhere was leaking memory. Yes. So yeah, it's very hard with IE, and I have some hopes that it improved in IE 11, but I haven't confirmed that yet, so I don't know.
Another thing you can do if you are creating any new scopes outside of the router, then you need to make sure that you clean up, you delete those scopes, because the ng route, it will go through and do what is it, scope.destroy, I believe it's called, which destroys the DOM elements and any other scopes. But if you're doing any new scopes outside of the router, then you got to clean those up yourself. Any other tips, or move on?
I think this is a topic that we could spend a week on.
Yeah. All right, this next one. What is the best practice for modularizing your app? For instance, naming and file layout. I think this one was already answered by the Angular seed project, so we don't really need to talk about that.
Actually, Julie, if you could talk about this. So Julie wrote a fairly good doc for Googlers on how we do it internally. Maybe talk about what we did.
Sure. And Naomi also gets a lot of credit for this. We've been looking into organizing things by feature instead of by type, which has been an idea that's been around for a long time and really should have been updated sooner. So we've written that as sort of the official internal Google-style guide now. The structure that we ended up with is called this Fractal directory structure, and the basic idea is things that are singletons go into a singleton components folder. So you've got your directives there, you've got your services there, and those are things that, in theory, you could share with another application, and so you want to bundle those into a folder that's as independent as possible. So anything you can do to make it so that it's its own module, it could just pick up and move to something else. And then all of your controllers live alongside their views, and those are in a nested directory structure where that makes sense by feature in your application. I don't know if this is what Angular Seed is updated to yet. I'm getting no's. Okay, so that's going to happen at some point.
Or maybe, is there any way we could like open source part of this doc or something?
I believe that Naomi is working on that.
Cool.
Next.
Awesome. What is going to be the biggest challenge for Angular in the next couple of years?
Boy, we could maybe go down the line. I think like Igor has a whole talk on this tomorrow, but I think dealing with success is probably one of the biggest challenges we've got. Thank you, by the way. Anyone want to add more? But that's not being pandering. That means like, hey, there's a lot more issues, a lot more people doing things, a lot more people have opinions on the way we ought to go. People submitting pull requests. These are all good things, but requires a lot of help. So.
I think it's a very good answer.
That's a pandering. I think we could talk about this tomorrow after my talk.
Okay, sounds good. When will Angular support a bind once feature for immutable data?
1.3.
1.3, everybody. What about replacing dirty checking with JavaScript's observed mechanisms? Will it come in the near future?
I think that was answered in the keynote. We very much are looking at object observe. It is the way of Angular 2.0, and we're going to have polyfills. So I think object observe is going to happen sooner than you guys think.
So I'm curious about that. In browsers that support object observe, does that mean those browsers won't be doing any dirty checking?
That's currently the plan, yeah.
Awesome. So it does cover all the same cases.
Should we talk a little bit about dirty checking and our findings in Dart?
That's a complicated thing. So I've been spending a lot of time looking at dirty checking and ways to improve it, and having access to the Dart folks and the VM folks, you get to learn all kinds of crazy things about how VMs do things under the hood. One thing you find out, and this is silly to say after the fact, but it turns out that the shortest code is not necessarily the fastest code. Sometimes code that's complicated and long is actually faster because of the way VM optimizes things. And so we've been looking at redoing the way we can do dirty checking, and currently we seem to be pretty confident that we can get it in the realm of something like 10,000 bindings per millisecond, which is in the range where it should be in the range of where it shouldn't be an issue. Now, these are hard numbers to decide and figure out. But if you do just a simple loop of checking a field, and you have a linked list of things that you can check, you could be surprised how many things you can check in the millisecond. You can get into somewhere in the range of 100,000 field dereferences in a millisecond, which is it's a raw number which you have to then divide by things like go iterating over lists and checking other things, and there's other complications that come into play. But these numbers are very encouraging. So what I've been doing actually in the past month is completely rethinking the way dirty checking works in Angular, and I'm getting some really good results. We'll see what comes out of it.
Don't hold us to the number. The key point is that it can be insanely fast.
So the other thing is, in expressions, oftentimes you say things like controller.a, controller.b, controller.c, and you have to dereference controller all the time. So with the new system, what we have, we can actually realize, oh, you're always dereferencing controller, so we can check that once, and then we only check A, B, and C on it. So you get a lot of coalescing that can happen with expressions as well. We can also do things like, this is, by the way, all the stuff that I'm currently working on. We can also look at filters and realize that filter is a pure function, which means that it can only end if the input changes. So if you have a long filter chain, like here's a list of original items, filter through order by, filter through filter filter. You don't have to actually execute them all. You can just realize, oh, the original array never changed, and because the inputs haven't changed with the filters, I don't actually have to do any of that stuff. So we're doing optimizations like that to make this thing go faster.
Awesome. All right. Does Angular have an isomorphic future? What kind of server-side pre-rendering or optimizations might be possible?
I have a question. What is isomorphic future?
Nobody knows. So, hold on.
I actually looked it up, and it's...
Okay, so it's not isomorphic future. It's about isomorphism between the client and the server side. Igor? Or should I?
I'll talk about it tomorrow.
Why? She's not even going to come tomorrow.
So, I just want to leave you with a question, and that is that, close your eyes and imagine the future, and in the possible technologies that we might have in the future. Do you, in the future, imagine yourself that server-side pre-rendering is going to be the thing? Really? Or are we talking about what the kind of hacks we're doing today?
Can we get the future in 1.3?
When 1.3 rolls around, it will be the future, yes.
Tomorrow will be a future too. So I'm left completely confused by isomorphic questions. All right. Any more about server-side rendering? I know you guys had like a prototype at one point. This was like a year ago. I remember hearing something about it. Any updates on that?
I'll talk about that story tomorrow.
Okay.
That's what we call building demand. Let's move on.
I'm going to call a hotel and say I need a wake-up call for Igor's room at 4, 5, 6, and 7. Because if you're not there, people are going to be angry. All right, do you guys feel like Angular is succeeding for mobile development? If not, what can be done to make it a better fit for 60 frames per second mobile web apps?
Again, I think we probably addressed a lot of this in the keynote this morning, and the numbers Mishko just rattled off, and we'll all burn his house down if they don't come around. I think that'll help mobile apps.
Who all went to Max Lynch's Ionic framework presentation last night? Anybody go to that? That was awesome. So it's a framework for mobile built on top of Angular. A great fit with something like PhoneGap. So that's something to definitely check out too.
And we think it's super cool too. I think the other thing to reiterate from this morning is that we're focused heavily on mobile for the future. Like we're building an app that we will use every day, and we've got planned specific framework features to make mobile development better.
Don't spend too much time on it. I kind of think mobile is a fad. So
you could be right.
I mean, it's you guys' call, but I'm not up here using one of those fancy phones, am I? No. Okay. There are a lot of helpful modules that Angular community has built, most of which are spread across GitHub or other similar sites. Have you considered creating a plugin-style repo for these modules?
There is a thing called ng-modules.org, and so we like that one. It's actually a pretty easy way to find these things. Igor, do you have anything to add?
It's built on top of Bower, so you just put stuff in Bower and then use ng-modules to find it. And I think that's probably the best way, the best thing we can do right now. But I agree that the core team should focus more attention on this, and this is something that we're going to do.
Are you blessing ng-modules, and do you want everyone to jump in and start beefing that up? Or are you...
I think all of us should agree that that is the solution that we want for Angular, and then just settle on it and just start using it. But before we do that, we need to work with these guys closely and make sure that they want to do it in the way that is best for everyone.
Are they here? ng-modules, guys, are you here? Okay.
I think it's one guy.
Scratch that.
But he's super cool.
And he's from Utah, right? Yeah. Okay. How does Angular address lazy loading of modules and resources like require does?
Again, I think Voita just did this. Right? Yeah.
Okay. A lot of that comes down to the ability to have multiple injectors in the router. I saw.
Actually, let me just say that Dan Wallin has a really good explanation of this on his site. So you can go check his website out if you want to figure out how could I do it in today's world in Angular.
And actually, we have a talk about this tomorrow on Angular and required.js, so that should help too.
Can I actually add something to it? You can actually see most of this stuff actually implemented already in Angular Dart, where we have hierarchical injectors. Every DOM element gets an injector. The way things get assembled. For example, directive can simply ask for another directive. This complicated controller/require thing that we have to do in AngularJS is much simplified in Angular Dart.
Sorry.
So my point is, this is the future that we kind of laid out. We already tested this out. People love it. The developers love this. So we're going to take all these learnings, and this is what's going to be ported back to AngularJS.
Dart is clearly very important and is a great sandbox and testbed for a lot of these ideas. And I can see a lot of the benefits that come from it. But I can tell you that I and a number of other developers that I've talked to are very concerned about Dart being the new way that Angular is done. How strong is the commitment to AngularJS continuing to be the first-class citizen? Maybe along with Dart, but at least equal to Dart.
So the question was, hey, I see you guys working on Dart. I am concerned you will forget about me, the JavaScript guy. Was that right?
I'll go with that.
Yeah, okay, you'll go with that. So yeah, we're absolutely committed 100% to JavaScript being first-class citizen and Dart. And I think what you can actually track us on GitHub to see how much we're investing in both. Currently, our releases in Dart are not as fast as we're doing on the JavaScript end. We would like them to be equal. So I think if anything, you should worry about, like if you're a Dart person, you'd worry that you are the second-class citizen. We will fix this. But the idea is that these will be equal in support.
You may not want to come to the Angular Dart talk tomorrow. So
we should also mention that currently there is many more people working on AngularJS than Angular Dart, and
we could hire some more, I suppose, if anyone out there wants to come work.
Everybody here using Dart, Angular Dart specifically, just Dart by itself.
Yes. We have. We have exactly one person in the audience, so yeah.
Wow. James is going to have a tough crowd tomorrow. What about Silverlight Dart? Who's using that? I'm running a few production apps with it, so. All right, we have a few more minutes. Why don't we just field a few more questions from the audience?
Unless you want to ask the ones that are on the board, feel free.
Hands up if you want the ones on the board.
The Dart, just one more question about Dart.
It looks like this guy just overruled the whole thing. We're just gonna go ahead, man.
One person using Dart, isn't that a sort of astroturfing in the community? I mean, what do you see behind Dart that's so useful and helpful?
Well, why are we doing Dart? Is that the question?
Now, his question is, why are you hurting his feelings about Dart?
So, I mean, maybe the best way to explain this is many things can be good for different reasons in the world. And I think, like, if you can find a way to understand, we've never had as many people on the Angular team as you see before you. A lot of the APIs that you saw were built with 3 people, Igor, Vojta, and Mishko. And now we're at 14. And we will continue to grow. So I think, like, don't worry about how much time we're spending on Dart. I think one of the things, if you are someone with a Java background, you probably like Dart a lot. It looks a lot like the classes, the class structure and inheritance that you're used to there.
It's not a selling point. Sorry.
So here's a guy who is not a Java guy. So it might not be for you. And I think, like, let's maybe relax a little bit about maybe the world's a big place and there's room for lots of languages. And we could be friends with people who like Dart, and I think there will be a lot of them. So here's a kind gentleman over here who's been waiting for a question.
I'm not so much interested in server-side rendering, but I'll tell you one thing that we run into frequently, and that's we have complicated validations on the client side that we write JavaScript code, and this is stuff way beyond simply required or min and max links, things that compare dates against each other and interact in complex ways. And then we go to the server side, and we need to replicate all of that same validation, and it must be exactly the same so that there's not edge cases that one side says okay and the other side says isn't okay. How can we work around that replication of code? Wix had it really easy because they were cross-compiling Java to JavaScript, so they had a solution for that one. But now with Angular, I like it better in almost every way, but you don't have that.
So let me try to sum up the question as, I have to do data validation on the client and on the server, and now I'm writing the same logic twice. How do I get around this? And I don't think we've seen this done exactly, but we have another project that I run at Google who's using Dart, actually. But it's nothing, like you could reuse. Now the truth comes out.
That guy actually wants to join the team.
Yeah. It's safe with me, man. We haven't actually solved this, but what we've done is we've built a meta layer on top of our rendering. It's a way to render entities from the database into the UI with just sort of metadata, kind of the way we're making directives a declarative way to put together a template. We make this a declarative way to decide how I'm going to render an entity at that level of the database. And part of the thing we put in there are validation rules in a declarative format. And so you might think about doing this, abstracting your validation rules in a way that you don't have to write new code on the client and the server, but they could just interpret that metadata.
I think it's also going to be really helpful when there's a common format between the client and the server. So when finally we have ECMAScript 6 modules, that's going to help a ton in the sharing of the two.
Can you use Node.js on the server side? Because in that case, you're gonna extract all this shared code into plain JavaScript. That at that point you can run it both on the client and on Node.js part. And if you want to make it easier to maintain, you can use either require.js or Node modules and browserifier in the client. I think that in theory should work. That sounds scary.
For those of you at home, he said he was going to use Rhino on the back end, but...
Well, so then what else can you do other than like inventing some higher level language or something? Because you have different language on the server than on the client, so...
Just use ASP. That's what I do.
Yeah.
Maybe one question over here. So I think the question was really, how do we help? There's this high-level roadmap, and there's the how to submit a commit message, and there's no guidance in between. And at the risk of invoking the wrath of the audience, wait till tomorrow in Igor's talk.
If he comes.
I can take this one. I think Caitlin is an awesome example of how this can be done. So I don't know if you noticed, but Kate P is her GitHub username. She just took over a GitHub. Like, I'm serious. Like, there's nobody more active on.
And she never talked to us before she did it. She just went for it, right?
She just like started commenting on every single pull request and every single issue and just saying, oh, this is bogus, or oh, this is really a problem, and it's because of this and that. And I'll send a pull request and associate it with this issue. And then, like, when we are triaging stuff, we just kept on seeing her name over and over and over again. I'm like, what is she doing? Well, she was really passionate about Angular, and she wanted to help. And I started just working with her, and I spent last month and a half, 2 months, just working with her, having her review my pull requests, also me reviewing her pull requests. And after this month and a half, I liked her so much that we just decided to hire her.
Now, this isn't the path for everybody that you're prescribing.
Yes, but what I'm saying that the way you can know how we think is by working with us, and GitHub is the place to work with us.
Right. But we are talking. You will talk about more scalable methods that we want to get everybody involved tomorrow.
Something better tomorrow. Yeah.
But really, the most helpful is just to do like a +1 on GitHub and spam it to the Angular team, right?
Actually, some discuss comments would be helpful too.
Let's take one more
Actually,
question.
I was going to add one. So you kind of alluded to that. If you comment on an issue or open a bug, we're not going to look at it. I think that historically that's been true, but lately we've been reviewing these every day, so it's less of an issue. So if you do comment or open something, it's more likely that we'll review it, we'll give some feedback, we'll say wrong approach or whatever's wrong with it.
All right, let's field one more question in the back.
What support for Google Closure and Angular living together in peaceful harmony do you have? That looks like a really awesome library.
So the question is, what support do we have for Closure, Google's Closure, not Closure like the Lisp-like thing, and Angular do we have to work together?
I can get this. So the internal projects at Google that use Angular almost all use Closure as well. And
Oh yeah, tell us what it is.
Would you like to know what Closure is? Closure is Google's library for JavaScript in general.
It's jQuery by Java.
Exactly.
By Google.
But it's
sorry.
Java inspired. You can go through. It's really hard to search for documentation on it because the name is Clojure, which was a great choice. But it's written in a lot more of a Java-like style. It has DOM manipulation libraries, and it also has a lot of helper libraries. So when we use it internally, we tend to use Clojure for its syntax. It has a compiler which does minification and adds a type checking system to JavaScript. So that's a primary use for Clojure. And just sort of for code organization, it has a provide and require module. So that's used for dependency management and minifying code. And then Angular is used for all of the DOM manipulation, all of the what Angular's good at. So there's a couple of rough spots. You've kind of got this file dependency management is done by Clojure, but the Angular also has its own dependency injection. And we have some good internal style guides that are trying to figure out how to merge these two together. It works pretty well. There's some boilerplate and some verbose steps, but I think overall you can really use them together if they just what's taking care of what.
And hopefully when we release some of our internal documentation outside, you guys can see how we do this.
Yeah, we'll be able to release as well.
All right, so let's wrap it up. Thanks for answering those questions. Really, you know what? There would be no ng-conf if it weren't for these guys. Like the other day, I had to go back to just jQuery for this little thing I was building, and I had forgotten how painful it was doing all the DOM manipulation yourself. Not having to be able to inject your modules, and maybe just so grateful for the work that these guys do. So let's give them a round of applause.